So web data in its most basic definition is a collection of characters that come in different shapes and forms and sizes. Sometimes it comes in a form of image data. Sometimes it comes in a form of text data, maybe music, or in our case, I guess, video data. It is used for all kinds of different purposes by businesses, by individuals. Sometimes it's used for research purposes, marketing purposes, but mostly for communications because internet as a whole is used to connect between people and basically connect between different ideas and kind of spread around messages. And yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I would say data is really the start of where information is formed. You can have all this data, but you need to actually aggregate it, collect it, clean it. There's so many different steps to actually get to a point where it's meaningful and you can make conclusions based on it. So having access to the best data possible for businesses nowadays is absolutely crucial to be able to make the correct decisions. And if they have the wrong data, out-of-date data, that's going to be even worse than having no data at all.
Yeah. I think they both said it best. It's just web data is, the information you can get value of, whether that's through business or research.
Cloudflare would be the toughest layer of protection to break because it is maintained by professionals. It is not embedded inside the source code. And basically, they keep making it stronger and better with time. So if you go right now to Stack Overflow, you'll find a bunch of solutions that used to work in 2018 and 2019, but they're no longer relevant because Cloudflare updates and creates patches, and it's an ongoing thing until somebody breaks those protections, and then they create new ones. So it's very, very difficult to deal with from my experience.
Some of the technical issues, I'm just going to, from like a non-technical perspective, would be when a website has a lot of content that moves around, like dynamic content. So that means that some of the data you will get will probably be incomplete, or something is missing in it, just because it won't be able to get exactly what you need when you're trying to get something very specific. Rate limiting. So sometimes you will have like some IP bans, and websites will limit how many times you can have how many requests you can make from an IP. And then you will have, of course, the CAPTCHAs, the ones that all the websites now are implementing in order to recognize whether you're human or bots. And a robot, I mean, we figured out a lot, but we haven't figured out how many images have stairs in them yet. Until we do, we'll be able to not have these issues when we're scraping the web. So the way around that, or for me at least, the way I know is using Bright Data, because it's just the easiest way, most complete tool for it. I don't really need to think about it so much when we're also using like the web browser IDE. Like that's already included, and we don't really need to think about these kind of issues. Having incomplete data is a big issue enough. We want to focus just on that instead of all the other things.
I was going to add on to what Gita said, where it's, you mentioned the time aspect as well. When things go down or things break, in that case, when you, from a business standpoint, you think of the time and cost, then it goes into, for developers, looking into debugging and finding exactly what went wrong versus having that complete data to start with and not having to have those worries. I think it's a huge benefit too.
I think the only tool that I've seen that can handle it is actually something by Bright Data. It's the browser unlocker. Also, you can actually pay some companies abroad. I know that there are a few very nice companies in India that can help you with that. You pay them per CAPTCHA, and they solve it for you.
So I was literally doing this yesterday. I was just trying to create a simple demo just to see the time difference on scaling web data. So just trying to grab some Amazon data and see how long it would take to do it synchronously, meaning one page at a time in the same browser on my local computer versus doing it using like a scaling solution, having a bunch of different computers doing it at the same time. When I was trying to do it asynchronously, it's like 10, 20, 30 seconds per page. As a developer, it's very trial and error, and I have to wait for it to finish, just to even maybe see an error that pops up. And then all of a sudden you get to page 20, 30, you start getting hit with IP blocks, CAPTCHAs. It's really frustrating when already you're trying to deal with, collecting the data, which is hard enough. And now you have some other tool and something that's not in your control that's blocking you. So to solve that instead, right, I need to use a solution that can automatically scale for me. So I use the Bright Data, what is it called, scraping browser, where I can just load as many of those as I want. And all of a sudden I've gone from taking minutes or hours to scrape 100 pages of data to doing it in 30, 40, 50 seconds with almost 100% success rate. Quite a few of my friends who know that I'm a developer and know I do all the YouTube stuff will sometimes just come to me with random ideas, right? I'm sure many of you here have probably got that before too, where someone knows you're a dev and all of a sudden you get pitched with a million business ideas. A lot of those ideas are around data, and people just seem to think, oh, it's out there, it's on the internet, it's super easy to get it. We should just be able to collect, millions of pages instantly. It's just almost like an oversight. A lot of people don't consider the difficulties of actually scraping that, and also the fact that there's entire businesses dedicated to not allowing you to be able to do that, right? Where their whole competitive edge is owning that data and not sharing it with everyone. So I think a lot of people just don't really consider how difficult it actually is. And even as an experienced developer, even when you have access to all of these tools, it's still a hard thing to do, right?
Back when I was a software. Oh, sorry.
What? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. So back when I was a software developer and I had a business with, running a software development agency, I would often not only have to develop the product, but also find a way to insert initial data so that they would be able to launch with something that wasn't empty, which was very important for them in order to succeed. And so a lot of them thought it was just as simple as it's basically kind of going onto a website, copying and pasting values into a spreadsheet, but just find a way to do that in programming ways, which is really not easy. Once the automation starts getting involved, that's when the battles start to begin. And in really random ways too. It's not even necessarily that one scraping solution will work across the entire board. I was going to mention this on the last question here, but just recently I was trying to build this website where I could create these AI sound bites with characters by replicating their sounds. And I found that the best way to do this was to scrape sound bites from a website where it's like a soundboard, like when you hear the memes or everything, you got 5 to 10 second clips of these random things you would hear. It's very, very web 1.0 type of thing. Well, they have been so exploited to scraping that the entire time they were finding ways to completely battle everything against it, and even to modern day ones. So one of them is that a lot of things would trigger through random JavaScript functions, and some of those would block or kind of mess up the page a little bit to just kind of defer scrapers from coming in and finding nothing. And so when you're doing the scraping and you're trying to block a lot of these things to stop the network requests from coming in, this would trigger the JavaScript to be okay, this is clearly someone doing it. So you have to find this battle here where everything is going on. And even just the concept of this battle was enough to be okay, this is no copy and paste solution. This is a whole other thing. It's a full-time thing.
Yeah, I had someone tell me, oh, can you scrape the email addresses of all of the Reddit users? And I was like, oh, I think a lot of the misconceptions, people kind of overestimate, first of all, the quality of the data that they will be getting on firsthand. In some cases, not for everybody, and how easy it is to access. And yeah, it is what's available publicly on the web. That's what you can get. And sometimes people really don't know how far or what's available on the web. Just it's general misconception about web data in general. So
So for me, just to adapt to what Tim said earlier, one of the business pitches that was like going around me is something that has to do with real-time data, which is something that we haven't discussed yet. It's data that is updated by the second. So for example, Bitcoin transactions, or like I would say stock market transactions, maybe the number of planes flying in the sky, stuff like that. It's very, very difficult. You need to create WebSockets. You need to collect it actively. And that's what I found to be the most challenging thing, because I would assume that businesses expect to collect this data very, very fast. But how can you even do it if you're like a simple developer like myself? You know, I may not have all these tools in my pocket. So that's what I find a bit challenging.
So something when I first started off that was really helpful was what was funny is that a lot of the, like my solution that I needed required a user to automatically like initiate this scraping method through like a web application. So at the time, AWS released, I think, like an updated timeout session on their serverless functions. So that's what we used, because you never know with how long it would take something to scrape the data for. Sometimes it could take 10 seconds. Sometimes it could take 2.5 minutes. So something like a serverless function that would only charge you by the minute versus just the entire time it's running is very important in the tech stack as well as obviously things like Python, which is used to quickly grab something. I've been using Go lately to be able to create like much more structured data consistently. Some with Python that I love is that it's really, really fast as from the developer experience, but being able to like catch those errors, which is very common in web scraping, has been a huge plus for me. So that's part of the tech stack that I use. And then of course, Bright Data.
Yeah, personally, when I do web scraping, a lot of the projects I'm working on are just hobby projects. They're for fun. They're for a YouTube video. I don't need anything that's going to scale like crazy. So I just want to be able to really quickly build out like a quick demo. So in my case, I love using Python for that just because it is dynamically typed, is way faster to write in. Obviously, I'm biased because I use Python like every single day. And then within that, I can switch between like Selenium, Playwright, use the async libraries for that. And even ChatGPT, I find, is really good at even writing like basic web scrapers. If I give it, for example, like the HTML of a page. So usually where I start is I just grab the HTML of a page I'm looking for, dump it to ChatGPT, tell it, hey, use Selenium, and then just go and kind of tweak the script. So that to me has been able to get really simple web scrapers up and running in just a few minutes, which has been great.
I think a very reliable tool for these purposes would be Mechanical Soup and Beautiful Soup. It is something that is used mostly for static websites. So when you're dealing with dynamic websites, like Tim mentioned, Selenium would probably be a better solution. But when we're talking about things that are at scale, I think a more reliable way is Beautiful Soup and Mechanical Soup. And then you kind of arrange it inside a pandas data frame. You can manipulate this data. And Python would be an incredible language for that, because anyone can use it. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to be a sophisticated developer. In fact, my first web scraping project that I made, I had no knowledge of web scraping at all. I got requests from my viewers to cover, web scraping. It's like, what is it all about? And I kind of discovered it along the way. So anyone can use it. Anyone can do it. And I think when we're talking about companies that employ lots of developers who are far more knowledgeable than, the simple individual sitting at home in front of his couch and kind of programming it, you definitely need to combine some proxy services. So Puppeteer and Playwright. But this requires a bit more knowledge. I wouldn't say that, just Joe Blow can do it. But there's so many tools. And once again, I'm just going to glorify Python for this. Maybe I'm a bit biased too, but one of the best things about Python is the way to implement data science with. It is so easy it's just like plain English, right? To give your computer commands that are easy to follow. You don't need to be specific about a data types. You don't need to be specific about declaring any variables with specific bits that they take up in memory. So Python is very, very ambiguous in that term, and that's what makes it so easy to use.
I forget how we described it, but it's readable. It's almost feels like a human language, and sometimes it is for a lot of it. So
For me, I think what I really enjoy a lot currently is with the new set of open source models. We find that although from a general standpoint, they don't maybe like compare to the proprietary ones like the Geminis or the GPT-4s, some that we do find is that once these open source models are fine-tuned to do a specific task, a lot of the times they are just on par with that specific task. And so for me, something I love to do, my dream projects, and I have a couple of videos coming out about this, is that being able to like collect a niche set of data and being able to then translate that into a fine tunable model that you can then use for, with the Mistrals or the Llama 2s. They perform really well and can do some really incredible things when you just tell them to do a certain amount of things within this arguably small set of data from like a niche website or wherever it might be. So that's kind of the open source, that's kind of the project I'm looking forward to working on, is creating like these AI models that do very niche things very well and in a fun way.
So speaking of, dream projects and getting up and running with whatever that dream project is of yours, that's what I found really exciting when using Bright Data's predefined or existing data sets. So I went in there and there were so many different ones to choose from real estate to a lot of different fashion ones, all which really enticed me. And then even honestly, as I was going through it, just seeing them all laid out in front of me, I started thinking of other project ideas or things that I wanted to create. So it's kind of like a candy store in a way. But for this example, I ended up going with the real estate one from Zillow. So if anyone has not, I'm sure you've all used Zillow before. And if you haven't, I guess you're not a true creeper, because it's the best way to be able to go and see inside like these really expensive homes. You can see like what they look like. It's just a really fun thing. Also depressing thing sometimes when you realize like how expensive these things are. But anyways, so for this project, I used Zillow's data set and narrowed it down to homes that were, I believe it was homes that were over $1 million, located in LA. I wanted to get a bit more specific to start with for that data set. And then from there, what I did is similar to what Tim was mentioning earlier, in some cases, starting with ChatGPT, even just to get that skeleton or that outline of what's next, especially when you're starting off with more so for a personal project. So input that data into ChatGPT, and with different prompts was able to get out, different graphs, different charts that was analyzing it based on what I was hoping to get back. So things such as show me homes that are with, 2 bedrooms or different things like that. And then what I really love when using ChatGPT for this use case is when you hover over the graph or the chart, it will actually show you the code in Python, which I think is so cool for anyone who is really new in this journey, or maybe you're a senior developer, but you've never worked with this side of technology before, and being able to take that skeleton and learn from it.
One of my dream projects would be to have like a life assistant, especially if you live in a big city, some kind of app that scrapes or Eventbrite, Meetup, resident advisor, whatever, suggests what kind of events I should be going to this week, puts them in my calendar even, or recommends based on recurrent dishes that I have with my friends in specific restaurants, what restaurant to book next for getting together. So instead of having to do that, I think, it would be a great solution for people who live in big cities.
One I was thinking about as well was like recently when CES passed, was one of the biggest things was the Rabbit N1. Rabbit N1 is like this little device, for anyone who doesn't know, that kind of like is like an AI in your pocket. It's not a phone, but it kind of works like a phone. But where the biggest advantage of it is that they're large. It's like something large action model, I think it's called. But basically, what it is, it's almost like you ask it to do something and it knows how to use a browser. to find the answer. So if I'm like, what are the cheapest flights to, to the United Kingdom, what would happen usually is that the AI would have some sort of like API integration that it would call to be able to, from Expedia or whatever. This obviously is very reliant on certain APIs that are available and the developers who have built those. But when it's with the browser, similar to like scraping, it's you're able to just use it as an internet user, and this kind of like opens up the floodgates to everything, and even some open source. So I think another cool idea would be like being able to find a way to train like an AI agent to be able to go through a browser to see like, okay, what does like, how do I click this? How do I go through this? And then when you ask a question, it knows how to get to that answer on its own. And then to provide that data for you. So to me, that's something that I'm very interested in seeing, and like in being open source rather than proprietary.
So in terms of AI and where it's headed with web data and scraping, I think there's kind of two sides to it. There's one where it's going to, of course, automate a lot of these processes, and we can really lean on it as a tool to build quicker, build faster, and smarter. I think that kind of goes without saying for many people, but I do think it'll be really interesting to really take a step back and consider, especially the ethical considerations. As on the side I just said, it's going to continue to get smarter, work faster, and really help us and enable us. The other side of it too is, as it has that, is it going to get to a point where it is so much easier to go around through some of the obstacles we spoke about earlier? And what does that mean for companies who do want to not have their data scraped versus do? And I think the ethical considerations is something I'm very interested to see where that goes. And although I don't have a solution or answer for that, it's something that I just wanted to highlight as an area to be really aware of. And I think we're going to see a lot of big changes with that as well, and different regulations within the next year even.
I agree with Tiff. I think AI is going to help automate some of the cleaning and the processing of the data so that there's like less errors and inconsistencies. I'm trying to use it for Tech Bible now as well, to just better at least categorize the data that we're getting, as well as I would say like understanding the context of data, especially if you're scraping copy. For now, we have to really tell it what that is, but we kind of have to indicate it. But AI will help us just better, like be more like have this faster instead of a human having to manually do that, and understanding kind of the semantics of the text of the data that we're scraping.
I think it's just going to become more and more prevalent. I think more companies are realizing how much they actually need data to be able to compete. Even when I was looking at a few of the data sets you guys have on Bright Data, and I was looking through some of that information, I was thinking in my head, products I could come up with or things that I could do based on that. And I'm not even an e-commerce guy or someone who's in that industry. So if you're a company who's not doing that, you're not getting the most up-to-date data, you're not keeping track of what's doing the best or maybe even what's underperforming, I don't know how you would be able to keep up. So I really just think it's going to become a necessity for businesses, and they're going to have to figure out quite quickly how to adapt or get left behind.
For me, I noticed like a huge change in interest towards machine learning and artificial intelligence. So if 2 years ago I was filming videos that barely anyone watched, nobody cared about, suddenly now there are so many companies that are reaching out to me like, hey, Maria, I would like to be known in the field of AI. I'm not traditionally in the field of AI, but I would love to be associated with that. And from that point on, you kind of wonder what happened, what changed. And I guess it happened with ChatGPT. It became very, very popular, and people want to have their own ChatGPT. They want to have their Maria GPT or like Noah GPT or whatever it is. And I think each company wants to develop their own product at this point of time. And I think it's the right thing to do. You don't want to centralize everything under one category or one model. So I find it nice that there are so many open source projects coming up. But the interest of the individuals who would love to work in those companies is also changing, right? Because if the company is looking to be more prominent in the field of AI, anyone who would like to apply also needs a bit of AI knowledge. So, and not in terms of like how to use it, but how to build it. What is gradient descent, these type of stuff. So I find a huge change already. And as the future progresses, I would assume that anyone who films AI tutorials or machine learning tutorials will be like absolutely rich and famous. So that's my prediction.
I think as the industry moves, we've already found that AI has done a lot of disruption towards the industry. Something that I find, I think will happen a lot is a lot of people are going to find ways to hold on to their data. So a lot of people will want fine-tuned versions of their own models. So they'll go online and scrape. And as time goes on, I do believe that scraping technology is going to get easier, similar to like enter a prompt, here's your data, pay the $19.99 it costs or whatever it might be. But also, I do think that there's going to be some more issues moving forward. Excuse me. How this data is then kept a secret, I guess you could say. As something that we've been seeing a lot too is databases are now keeping a very, they're able to embed a lot of their data into a machine learning like embedding much easier for their similarity search, whatever. So something I think might be happening in the future as well is that these databases and the cost of AI is going to go so low that in order to kind of deter people from scraping data, they're going to give kind of like a crappy version given to the client if it's detecting it as a scraper to kind of give them the data, but it's not valuable data. And this could easily be done with AI as well. And so, so just similar to how everything is kind of like on the web for the last 20 years, I think we're going to have a lot more accessibility, but we're also going to have a lot more issues when it comes to being able to collect this data.